everybody. Welcome to Zone Defense. We talk all things NBA and NFL. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and smash that subscribe button down below because it really helps out our channel a lot. Also, leave a comment down below and let us know who is your pick to win the NFC South. Today we'll be doing another NFL divisional breakdown ahead of the 2021 NFL season with the NFC South. How's it going, Roman?
I'm good, Drew. I'm really excited to get into this one. It was very fun breaking down the NFC West last week. Unfortunately, Chris cannot be here, but he still gave us his predictions and players that he likes for fantasy purposes. So I'm excited to break it down with you.
Yeah, of course it sucks that Chris isn't here, but we'll hopefully be able to carry the load for him this week. In this division, it might be kind of a shocker because I think on the surface you think it's a really interesting division, but there's some intriguing teams, but I do think it's not like last week where the NFC West where any team could possibly win that division. This week I feel like there's one clear-cut winner in this division, and then there's the other three teams that could potentially be wild cards. I'm interested to see what your takes are on that. But yeah, it's not, at least for the divisional crown, I don't think it's going to be as much of a war as the NFC West. But we'll dive into one team that had a ton of turnover in the offseason, and that's the New Orleans Saints. Last year, they went 12-4. I believe they won the division, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they did. Okay. I couldn't remember if it was them or Tampa. And they won in a really just probably the worst game of the playoffs, to be honest, against the Bears in the wild card round. That was the Nickelodeon game, for those of you that maybe don't remember. So it was kind of memeable, but in terms of football, it wasn't great. And then they lost. They got kind of handled by the Buccaneers there in the divisional round, which ended up being Drew Brees' last game of his career as he retired. That was an early offseason headline was, will he retire? Will he not retire? Then there was this insane video of him training. Everyone's like, oh, he's coming back. And then like a week later, he retired. So he's gone. Really end of an era there for the Saints and New Orleans and one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Hanging it up now. But then they also lost Trey Hendrickson to the Bengals, Janoris Jenkins to the Titans, Sheldon Rankins to the Jets, Jared Cook to the Chargers, and Emmanuel Sanders to the Bills. So a few key pieces from their offense, a few key pieces from their defense last year, so they missed a lot of them. And they didn't do a ton in terms of additions to address some of those losses. They drafted Peyton Turner in the first round. They also got Tanoa Kapasanaganon, and they got tight end Nick Vanette. So yeah, they, like I said, although I butchered that name, I know they didn't do a ton to add. So I'm interested to see. I'm definitely not as high on this team as other teams. I know we got some flack for our last week's episode because we gave the Seahawks a lot of crap. Well, look out, Saints fans. That's all I got to say because I don't like this team at all, really that much, to be honest with you. But Roman, how would you start us off here? What do you think about the Saints' chances heading into 2021?
Well, first of all, I put that name in the additions just to see how you'd pronounce it, and it lived
I
up to my
appreciate it.
expectation. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And you kind of mentioned it last year. The division had more intrigue just because it was Brady's first year in the NFC South with the Buccaneers. So definitely looking forward to seeing how this season is. For the Saints, though, I do think they aren't going to be the division winner in my book. I think that's kind of clear. I think the biggest storyline just is who's starting between Winston and Taysom Hill. Last year, when Breeze was out for a couple games, you did see Taysom Hill in there. Did fairly well. I mean, he didn't really throw the ball a whole lot. I mean, most notably, you kind of see that Broncos game where the Broncos were starting a wide receiver at quarterback, and Taysom Hill was just running the ball the entire game for the Saints. But I don't know. Some people are saying Winston's the starter. Some people are saying Taysom Hill can be the starter. You see Sean Payton, he really high on Taysom before. He said that he could be a starting quarterback in the league one day. I'm not sure about that, but I think you'll definitely see both of them for sure. Whether it's Winston starting and Taysom being the gadget guy, or vice versa, even because you did see Winston in that a little bit of that role last year. I think that obviously it's going to be a step down, whoever is at the quarterback position, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as maybe some people might think they are going to be. Like I mentioned, they're not my division winner, but I still think they'll have a pretty good record.
Yeah, so that's the big storyline heading into 2021, right? You mentioned it there. It was the Winston versus Taysom Hill debate. I'm definitely, this might be a surprise. I don't know why it would be a surprise, but I'm definitely Team Jameis. I think he gives him a little more of a chance to win. I feel like Taysom Hill, he's more of a gadget QB where you can throw him in there in different sets, and that's where he thrives the most, is when he's kind of changes the pace a little bit rather than being the guy. Because like you said, yeah, he was able to beat up on a Broncos team that didn't have a quarterback. But then he kind of struggled in some other games too. He definitely wasn't as bad as I think a lot of people, including myself, thought he would be. But I don't know if he showed enough to be like, yeah, he's the guy. But yeah, there's a lot of there's not a lot of clarity there right now who's going to be their starter. And we're about a month out, a little over a month out now from the start of the NFL season. So hopefully that gets cleared up a little bit sooner rather than later. That's really going to be the deciding factor here for this team, I think. They do have some pieces on the offense still. I'm sorry, do you want to add something?
I was gonna say before you probably got to it, but one thing that we even forgot to mention and didn't add it to this document was that he injured to Michael Thomas, right? He might miss the first half of the
Yeah.
season almost. So that will definitely contribute to maybe their lack of success in the first half of the season. But that's definitely gonna hurt them a lot.
Yeah, I think it was going to be an uphill battle even if Michael Thomas was there.
Hmm.
But getting him back, presumably fully healthy, was going to be really nice for them because he was hurt most of last year. Now the fact he's probably going to miss a majority of the season this year, also with another injury, it's really tough for already an offense with a lot of uncertainty. After the Breeze injury and even the Breeze retirement and even the Emmanuel Sanders and Jared Cook departures. I mean, I know they weren't great last year, especially for fantasy purposes, but they were decent options there for the offense, and they both left. And now you got uncertainty at quarterback, and you got Alvin Kamara. But then outside of that, it's a lot of question marks there for that offense. And I think they really need Winston or Taysom Hill to be good for this team to succeed. And you can say about any team with the quarterback, but I feel like especially this team, if one of those guys are good, I still think they have a solid defense. It almost surprised me if you look at like yards and points per game last year. They were top 5 in defense. They had a really good defense last year. They lost some pieces, but I still think that's going to be a solid unit. It's going to keep them in games. The real key though is going to be this offense. Can they do enough to kind of keep the defense off the field, not get them so tired, and also able to not put so much pressure on them all game long? It's really going to come down to these quarterbacks. So because of that uncertainty, I also don't have them. I don't believe I have them making the playoffs. They don't have a terrible record. They're not last in this division, but they don't have a great record in my eyes. So I can jump into that right now if you want. I have them at 7-10. I think there's a little leeway up there. They could go a little bit higher. They could get 9-10. They could sneak into a wild card if some of those things bounce right. If Michael Thomas comes back and he doesn't have to be the former record-breaking MT that he was in 2019. He just has to be better than he was last year and on the field and somewhat a contributor. But if that's not the case, I think they could definitely lose more than 10 games as well. It could be a tough year for New Orleans because there's a lot of question marks, and I feel like this is the most question marks this Saints team has had headed into a season since like I don't even know when. Like it's got to be at least a decade, I think. So yeah, it's gonna be a different year for the Saints fans, but hopefully Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston is able to kind of steer the ship in the right direction.
Yeah, it would be a very disappointing season if they ended up going under 500 for sure. But I think you have to give them the benefit of the doubt, though, because a couple years ago you did have Teddy Bridgewater as their starter for like 3-4 games, and he was able to win all those. So I think Winston or Taysom, I think those are going to be an upgrade in terms of the backup they have. So I think it's possible that they can right the ship a little bit for them. I do have them with a better record than what you project them. I have them at 10-7 actually
Okay.
second in the division. Um, it seems like we've been saying this for some other teams, even in our last division, but you have to have a couple lucky bits, a couple breaks the other way. So I think they can be good. I don't think they're going to be the division winner. I don't think they have a chance at winning the division. Um, because even last year the Saints defense did give the Bucs some trouble. I mean, Brady didn't have his best games against the Saints defense, but now I think they've gone clear in terms of being the best team in this division. They brought everyone back, as we'll talk about a little later. But the Saints, I do think they'll have some challenges along the way, but I don't think they'll have the worst record ever.
Yeah, I don't think that I can see them going 10-7 for sure. As we already said, the defense is good. They didn't lose a ton on that side of the ball. It's really just gonna come down to those quarterbacks. And if they
Mhm.
get, even if it's both of them, even if they have like a 1A 1B thing, which I think could also potentially work, which they kind of did before, even when Breeze was still there as well. That could definitely give them 10-7, and they're well coached with Sean Payton. I think this could be kind of like what we saw last year with Bill Belichick. Like, can he actually coach without his quarterback? We might be kind of seeing a similar storyline this year with Sean Payton. Can he succeed without Drew Brees? Because Brees obviously has been there since I think 2006, so that's insane. So Yeah, I could definitely see them going 10-7. So you said you had them at second in the division. They're actually going to be third in my division because I'm slightly higher on another team that might come as a surprise a little bit later on. And then Chris had them at 9-8. So we were all kind of in that 7-10 win range all around this. We're all kind of in the same ballpark there. But yeah, I do think though something the Saints have going for them is this is not the NFC West. It's not like, yes, the Buccaneers are an awesome team. They're on a whole nother level. They're a Super Bowl contender. But then the other three teams are all kind of in that same tier of the Saints, I would say. And if the Saints are able to, yeah, they might lose to the Bucs twice, but if they're able to sweep the rest of the division, which I think is definitely possible, they could really set themselves up very nicely for a wild card berth. Even if maybe they're not the best team on paper, they're going to be well coached. Their defense is going to be good. It really is going to be down to the offense. Like I said, I think it's definitely possible they could sneak into the playoffs. But anything else you wanted to add about the Saints before we hop into our next team?
No, I think we got it all down.
All right. So just to recap, you're the highest at 10-7. Chris is second, 9-8, and then I'm at 7-10. And like last week's episode, we will of course go through our standing projections at the end of the ep after we break down each team. But next up, we have the Carolina Panthers, and this is the team. Spoiler alert: that I'm a little bit higher on than maybe some other people. I think they could be a little frisky this year. And I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but I'm saying they could be a fun watch, like kind of like they were last year, but almost a little bit better. So in terms of 2020, they went 5-11. They missed the playoffs once again. That was with a new coaching staff and with Matt Rule and Joe Brady. They completely revamped the defense. I think it was one of the youngest defenses in the league, which meant it wasn't super great. On the offensive side of the ball, they had Teddy Bridgewater for most of the year. He was kind of good to start the year. Then he got hurt, and then he kind of fell apart, and then it wasn't good. And the offense really struggled down the stretch. And they actually were in the playoff hunt. They were a team I know we talked about a lot on this show about maybe the Panthers. Are they good now? What's happening here? And then they just really fell off down the stretch and ended up at 5-11. Another disappointing losing season. But they had a massive offseason. Key additions, you see the man, the myth, legend right there, Sam Darnold. They added him at quarterback, a trade with the Jets. They beefed up their offensive line a little bit with adding Pat Eflin and Cameron Irving. They also got AJ Bouye, Hassan Reddick, and they drafted JC Horn to hopefully add to that little bit younger defense, as I mentioned earlier, and hopefully give them a little more juice headed into 2021. In terms of key subtractions, they got rid of Teddy Bridgewater. They traded him to the Broncos. I don't think that's a huge subtraction for them. They lost Mike Davis to the Falcons, who had a pretty solid year last year. That is a little bit of a loss, but something we didn't add in the additions here is the return of Christian McCaffrey, who was lost to injury for pretty much the entirety of last season. So that's another huge addition to this team. And then they also lost Curtis Samuel to the Washington football team. I almost called them by their former name there. That was the first. I got to get back in the rhythm here. That was the first time I almost caught myself there. But lost Curtis Samuel, who had a pretty solid year last year as well. For the Panthers. But yeah, I'll get to start here with this team, if that's okay. I really like this team. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but I think they're definitely going to be in the wild card hunt. I have a Sam Darnold Jets jersey. I almost wore it today, but it's weird because he's a Jets when he's on the Jets anymore. But I think he could have a really solid season this year. Is he going to be an MVP? Is he going to live up to maybe all the hype he had coming out of college a couple years ago as the best prospect, better than guys like Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson? This season, probably not, but I still think he's going to be solid. He's not going to be the worst quarterback in the league like he was last year. And you read all the stories coming out of camp. It's that he's got zip on the ball. He's good. He's partnered to back up with his former Jets teammate Robbie Anderson, who they had some success there before. He's also got DJ Moore. Already mentioned there, Christian McCaffrey. I just think everything that possibly could have went wrong for Sam Darnold, and it's not all on the Jets. Some of it is on him, and maybe he's not as talented as we used to think. But everything that could have went wrong for him in the Jets went wrong. And we saw, I know everyone's drawn this comparison, but we saw with Ryan Tannehill. When he left the Dolphins, got out of Adam Gase's system, he blossomed. Now he's a top 10 quarterback. Darnold is much younger than Ryan Tannehill was then, and I think there's a potential there. He's also got a really, really awesome offensive coach in both Matt Rule and Joe Brady. I think he's going to be really thrive in this offense. The offensive line still isn't great, but they did try and address it at least a little bit. So hopefully they can give him enough protection. I think he can have a really, really nice season. I think their defense is going to be much improved from last year because a lot of their rookies will have another year under their belt. and as well as they added solid picks in J.C. Horn, as well as Hassan Reddick and A.J. Bouye in free agency. So I'm not going to tell you the record prediction yet. I'll let you, Roman, you can dive into that. I'll let you dive into your analysis, then we can do record predictions. But I really think this is a team that is going to be young and up and coming, a really fun watch, a really good story, and maybe just missed out in the playoffs. I think a perfect comparison for them, maybe not perfect, but could be like last year's Cardinals, where they're fun to watch. They're like a good story. Everyone loves them except me because I called them the Fraudnals. But they just missed out in the playoffs. But if a few things bounce their way, maybe they will sneak in there as a wild card. But I know I talked a lot, but I do really like this team. I think they are the second best team in this division, in my opinion. But Roman, what do you think about them?
Yeah, well, first of all, I hope and I believe Darnold will have a better season. I think he actually has the pieces around him in terms of weapons, coaching, defense. Literally everything is better in Carolina than it is in New York. But like we've been high on the Panthers for the last year or so. We didn't think they'd be good last year, but we said they were upcoming.
Mm-hmm.
That was just because of the coaching staff, the defense. It was super young and they didn't do well, but at least they have another year under their belt, like you mentioned, Drew. So just getting more pieces, adding those key free agency signings. I think the only downfall, though, they do have a tough schedule,
Yeah.
especially down the stretch. You'll see. I mean, if you're high on the Falcons, they could be better. Then they finish out with the Bills, the Buccaneers twice, and the Saints. So definitely a tough schedule down the stretch. They do have a couple of games that can go either way. I do think the Panthers will be a team that we should talk about. If not this year, then next year about the wild card conversation. But I think this is the biggest question mark in terms of the division. This team could finish either the same as last year in terms of record, or they can go above 500 and make the playoffs. Who knows? It just kind of depends on Darnold. It seems like just the quarterback play matters most for this team. But I do think they have the pieces to be successful. Like you said, Drew, you're higher on them than I am, and as well as Chris. But I think they could easily go above 500, although I don't project them to.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point there with the schedules. Their schedule to start the year, I believe, is actually kind of easier. So I think they are going to be very similar to the Cardinals were last year, where they can get off to a hot start. Oh, here we go, baby, and then they just fall apart down the stretch. Not because they're a bad team by any means, but just because they're going to have a really gauntlet there those last few weeks, as you mentioned. So, um,
And we'll know right away if they're going to be a legit team or not. They play at home versus Saints in week 2, so we'll kind of see how
yeah,
they stack up against the other division team, especially the Saints, as you had Panthers ranked above them.
yeah.
But well, that'll be a very good game to watch to pay attention to.
Yeah, it'll be a really to see if they measure up. Yeah, they're not going to be the Bucs. I'm not saying that right now, but really if they can measure up against those teams that are in that tier, at least I anticipate them being in with those teams that are fighting for the wild card. Which it really though it comes down to, as you said, on the quarterback position and specifically Sam Darnold. I mean, it's a lot on his shoulders here. And I as you mentioned, everything is improved in this situation with Carolina, and I don't want to scare Sam in any way, but if he's listening or watching this, but if he can't get it done this year, at least show signs of improvement and that like there's growth and he's going to get somewhere. I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen. I think he could end up being a career backup, which would be really disappointing, not for the Panthers, but just for him as a whole, because he was like that awesome godlike prospect just a couple years ago, ahead of guys who are now MVPs or in MVP conversations or winning playoff games or all sorts of different things back. I think it was the 2018 draft class. So a lot riding on Sam Darnold this year, but I tend to believe he can get it done. I think he can get it done. I think this is going to be a really, really fun team to watch, and I'm going to be rooting for them all year long. I didn't like Teddy Bridgewater last year as their quarterback because he really screwed me over in fantasy a lot. So I didn't really like this team that much last year. I was clouded by that. But this year with him, I'm really in on the Panthers. I think they're going to be one of my favorite favorite red zone teams to watch throughout the season.
And I think Robbie Anderson he'll be the biggest like key in this offense. And I think all the weapons get a boost. DJ Moore, he'll definitely have like a respectable season. David Moore, who they signed from the Seahawks, who isn't very notable, but just an addition himself. They got a couple of tight ends they signed. But Robbie Anderson, I think the chemistry that you mentioned, I think he could be the biggest beneficiary to having done on that team. And in terms of fantasy, I don't want to like look too much ahead, but I think he'll be a decent steal in the draft.
Yes. Spoiler alert, I very much agree. Um, but yeah, the Panthers, I think seems like we're both kind of in the same boat, but I'm interested to see what your record prediction is. But I'll do mine first. I'll do Chris's first, actually. So Chris has them going 7-10. I have them going slightly higher at 8-9. So I'm not super high on them in terms of record, but at the same time, it's a lot comes down to just because they have a really brutal schedule. But what do you have them at?
I have them at 6-11, so
Okay, so we're
little better than last year. But I think like I mentioned, that's what I think they'll do. But if Donald like exceeds expectations, he can be better than even what you thought about thinking of him, Drew.
Yeah, I mean that's very possible. So Chris had him at 7 wins, I had him at 8 wins, you had him at 6 wins. So we're all kind of again in that same ballpark for the most part. But yeah, so I think you said that they are. Oh, we'll get into it later. But they are my second place team for sure. But anything else on the Panthers before we move on to the next team?
I think this is just going to be the most. This could be the most surprising team in the division, the most interesting. You don't know what you're going to get out of them. Maybe it's like what you might see with the other teams. So definitely excited to see what they do.
Yeah, they're the most team to watch, I would say. Kind of like what
Hmm.
we were talking about last week with the Cardinals. I don't want to keep drawing these comparisons, but they are very similar. I feel like is with the Cardinals, they might not be the best, but they're going to be they have like the biggest range of outcomes of what could happen.
Hmm.
And I think
I
the
agree.
Panthers are very much in that twin too. And actually, real quick, one more thing I wanted to mention too: the addition of Christian McCaffrey. I think we didn't mention it enough. I mean, that's a huge addition. One of the probably I think Chris had him as the best running back. You said he may be a little bit lower. I was kind of in the
No,
middle when we did
he
our.
was my best. Yeah.
Oh, he was your best. I know someone had him as the best. Someone didn't. I don't remember who it was. But point is he's a very good running back, and if he can stay healthy all year, that's just another awesome weapon for Sam Darnold to have. And really, I mean, we didn't really see him a full year in that Joe Brady offense. I mean, if he's there for a full year with a full training camp and everything, and I think that's another storyline we're understating a little bit too, is that these teams have a full training camp. So a lot of those guys that maybe weren't great last year, they have a full training camp this year, and hopefully that'll kind of give them a boost. But yeah, I'm really excited to see Darnold and CMC back and everything with this team. Their defense another year older. It's going to be a really fun team to watch, even if they don't make the playoffs. But yeah, after we're hyping them up, they're probably going to go like 1-16, and Darnold will be out of a job and be released by January. But hopping now to our next team, the Atlanta Falcons. Another team that's like, I mean, their record last year, I don't think gives them justice. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know they were 4-12 until I prepped and saw that they were 4-12 for this episode. I mean, that's insane. I mean, I know their record last year was like horrendous. I mean, they were like down the stretch, like they were in games in the fourth quarter several times, and they just choked like every single time. I mean, the Lions, they choked against the Lions, they choked against the
Cowboys.
Chiefs, the Cowboys. I mean, they choked so much, and um, under normal years, normal circumstances, it seems like you probably win a few of those games and they have a little more respectable record. But I feel like they lost like every single close game they were in last year. I feel like, and that of course ends up you having a brutal year and you're 4-12. But this is a team who's just it seems like they've never really truly recovered from the 28-3 fiasco from a few years ago. But yeah, I mean that's why they now have a new coach in Arthur Smith. So maybe this will be kind of a turning the corner moment for them. But this is another team. I don't think they're going to be that bad. But I think they're going to be. They could definitely sneak into the playoffs. I think we'll get into it here in a second. But they also could be really bad again. So you never know because their defense still is not great. But in terms of key additions, the biggest addition, one of the biggest draft prospects I think has come out of the draft in several years. They drafted Kyle Pitts, 4th overall out of Florida. Again, monster prospect. We're trying to kind of temper our expectations for his rookie year because rookie tight ends tend to not have awesome years right out of the gate, but he seems like a generational prospect. So especially when we get into the subtractions here in a second, they're really going to need him to be good if they want to have a successful 2021 season. They also added Mike Davis, who, again, he's not like an awesome running back by any means, but I think he is definitely an upgrade from Todd Gurley last year, especially doesn't have those injury concerns that Todd Gurley had last season. They also had Cordarrelle Patterson, who I'll be honest, I thought he retired a while ago. Now on defense, they added Barkevious Mingo, Duron Harmon, and Eric Harris. Key subtractions. The biggest, I think, was Julio Jones. Obviously, they traded him to the Titans. I think it was almost 2 months ago now. So he's been the face of the Falcons really for as long as I've been watching football. I mean, a very long time there in Atlanta. And so it was sad, I'm sure, for Falcons fans to see him leave, but I think it was just time. They also lost Alex Mack, who's a solid piece of their offensive line. They lost Keanu Neal and Ricardo Allen, as well as Todd Gurley, who's still not signed in free agency. But I'll let you start off with this team. What are your expectations for the Falcons going into 2021?
I think they'll be better. That's one way to put it. Like you mentioned last year, they lost so many one-score games. They've lost so many leads. Most notably was that Cowboys game where they were up so much and they blew it late. But I do think they'll be better. Obviously, losing Julio Jones will be huge for them. But you can only hope that Kyle Pitts at least steps up into that role somewhat. I mean, you already had Calvin Ridley, who is on the come up anyway, so he can maybe fill in that role a little more. You have to have guys step up, though. Russell Gage, he'll have to step up. Mike Davis, even the receiving game, he'll have to step up. But I do like him as the running back. He'll be a starter day one. Cordero Patterson, either on the punt returning or wide receiver, running back duties. I mean, I think he'll be able to fill in that. He'll have a role in some way or shape or form. But that defense, it was pretty horrendous last year. I don't really think they did that much to improve in the offseason in terms of the draft. But they're going to need them to step up big time if they want to even have some sort of semblance to compete in the division. I don't expect them to, but I do think they'll at least improve from the record. It's kind of hard to not improve from a 4-12 record.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think they're gonna be like they were last year, in my opinion. Like I think their record is gonna improve just because they're not gonna lose as many one-score games. Because that was insane. I mean, I feel like every week it was red. They're a fun team to watch. I mean, every game they played was entertaining. Whether it was a good team they were playing against or a bad team they were playing against, they were in every game. But it's just I've never seen before a team lose literally every single close game. I mean, even like the Lions, for God's sakes, squeak one out every now and then, and the Falcons they couldn't do it at all. But I think the defense is awful, so it's still maybe some of the signings they made will benefit, and maybe they won't be as bad as they were last year. But I still don't have any faith in the defense. It's really going to come down to, can this offense be awesome, which I think it possibly can. I mean, yeah, Julio is a big loss, but he was injured a lot last year. He's been injured a lot the last couple seasons. They're adding a new dynamic talent in Kyle Pitts, who I think can be really good. I already met. They still have Hayden Hurst, and Arthur Smith in Tennessee did like to run two tight end sets, so I think that Hurst could still be a weapon. He's not an awful tight end. And that's kind of the role that he thrived in, I believe, back when he was in Baltimore as well. He thrived when he was kind of like the second in command behind Andrews. That was where Hurst really thrived. So maybe he can have a bounce back season. They still have not many teams lose a Hall of Famer like Julio and still have a bona fide wide receiver one on their team, and they do in Calvin Ridley. Their offensive line is not as great as it was last year with the loss of Mack, but I think it's still okay enough. And then I also think the addition of Arthur Smith, as I already mentioned too, bringing a new juice and energy to this offense could help as well. And then the running back room, I think, is a little bit improved too with Mike Davis instead of Todd Gurley. So I think the offense is going to be really fun to watch. I think they're going to be very similar to what they were last year. They're going to have a losing record. They're not going to make the playoffs. Spoiler alert, they're the worst team in this division in terms of record, at least based on my predictions. But they're going to be probably one of the best or most fun teams, most fun last place teams to watch, I think. Because talent wise, I think they have it there, at least on offense, that they could sneak up on some teams. And it would not surprise me if we end up in December and this team is like either in a wild card spot or like a game out of the wild card spot, and they're like making some noise, and maybe who knows what might happen there. Just because this offense, I think, could be really, really awesome. But unfortunately, their brutal defense is it's not going to be. It's going to hold them back from being. They could sneak into the playoffs. I mean, I think that's very possible. But the defense is going to hold them back from being a true contender, I think, for this division, for in the playoffs, in anything. So I think I'm interested. I don't know what your ceiling is for them, but my ceiling for them is like the 7th seed, and they get blown out in the first round of the playoffs to maybe Tampa Bay. Who knows? But yeah.
Yeah, I think last year they were in a lot of high-scoring games, and you can only hope that the offense has the same firepower. Like you said, Ridley is still there. Kyle Pitts might be able to make a difference, although it's not common for tight ends in the rookie year, like you mentioned. But I still have them as last in the division. I don't know what their ceiling could be. I think Ryan still has to play at a high level, and that'll be something that'll be talked about for a while. Whether Kyle Pitts was actually the correct pick when they could have had a quarterback on the board, whoever they liked. So we'll see. I mean, this could be Ryan's last year even. So that'll be interesting to follow along. Will the season be worth it? Will they have a good season enough to make Ryan come back? I mean, he's still on a hefty contract, but the Falcons still have to decide what to do with him. They denied trade rumors of trading him away, but I think they're still a couple years away from even being competitive to maybe winning a playoff game. So you just gotta hope that there's some sort of improvement, similar to Darnold and the Panthers. I think you have to hope for any sort of improvement that's worth keeping Matt Ryan around.
Yeah, I mean Matt Ryan, he's a solid quarterback. I think he's gonna have a decent year, like he always does. I think he's like 34, I believe, off the top of my head. I think you can look that up for me for a second as I'm talking, but he's older, but not super old. So I will defend their pick though of Kyle Pitts because I think
36. He's
he's
36.
36, a little bit older than I thought. So yeah, this probably will be his last year. I know last year there was a ton of trade rumors there that he might get traded. So maybe who knows what'll happen there. But I do think the Kyle Pitts was the right pick though for them because yeah, I think the guy they could have taken was Fields, right? He was the
Yep.
last. He was the guy still because Wilson, Trevor, and Lance were all gone, and they weren't going to take Mac Jones. I don't think at 4. At least I hope. So I think Pitts was the right pick because if they end up being as bad as we'll look at the records. If they end up being as bad as we think they're going to be this year, just especially with that, with like I said, with their defense and everything, they could have a high pick again next year. And there's some decent quarterback prospects in next year's draft as well. And I don't believe there's like a generational tight end prospect in next year's draft
That's
like there
true.
was Pitts. So if they're really kind of looking at the long game here and they say, okay, we can probably get one more year out of Ryan, and then we get a young quarterback next year, and we already have our young tight end here. Ridley's still very young. I mean, that's the foundation of a really solid offense, I think. So I think if that's their mindset, we'll have to wait and see here. If that's their mindset, I think the Pitts pick makes a little more sense than maybe it did at the time, because I also was kind of like, that's a stupid pick. Why'd they do that? They should have traded down or whatever. But we've had like 3 months to think about it now. So I think that it makes a little more
Yep.
sense, I guess, now.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think now if we can jump into the record predictions here. So I'll go first, and actually Chris and I will both go first because we have them with the same exact record. We both have them going 6-11, so slightly higher than they were last year. But I believe they're last place for both of us as well. So 2 wins more, but still missing the playoffs, still being last place, still most likely being one of the worst teams in the NFL.
Yeah, I have them at 6-11 as well. So
Okay.
we're all together on that. So yeah, for me, it's just the Panthers and Falcons tied for it's like third and fourth with 6-11 records.
Okay. So again, I think, and you mentioned this last about the Panthers and how we talked about them last year. I'm pretty sure this is word for word what I said last year about the Panthers is that the Falcons might be one of the best last place teams in the league. I know you mentioned it earlier, but I was kind of thinking, I'm pretty sure I said it about the Panthers last year that they'd be one of the most entertaining, fun, bad teams. I think the Falcons are going to be like that too because they were that last year, and I think they're going to be the same
Yeah.
exact thing.
Well, last year it was to a worse extent. I remember Chris saying that the Panthers would finish like 1-15 or something, but still entertaining nonetheless.
Yeah, yeah, and they were obviously they were much better than that.
Yeah, they surprised us all, really.
Yeah, so um, the Falcons, yeah, you're not going to be good this year, but you're going to be fun to watch, which hopefully that'll help your fans out, I guess, a little bit. But we'll now dive into the final team, the best team, unless you really shocking the world here, with the best team in this division, one of the best teams in all of football, in my opinion, the defending Super Bowl champs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last year, that's when I said at the top of the episode, I kind of forgot they didn't even win the division last year. They were 11-5. There was, of course, like they got off to kind of a slow start. There was the whole Brady doesn't know what down it is drama against the Bears. They were kind of struggling a little bit. I think they lost. Yeah, they lost opening weekend to the Saints, and that
Hmm.
kind of, and Brady had a bunch of turnovers. They didn't look great, but then they really obviously found their stride at the right time and were able to ride that momentum to a Super Bowl victory over the Chiefs. So yeah, obviously you couldn't ask for literally a better. Maybe they didn't win the division, I guess, and Brady didn't win another MVP. Maybe that's your only. If you're a Buccaneers fan, that's your one downer note from last season. But you really can't ask for much more with a Super Bowl victory. In terms of key additions, so they re-signed like their whole team basically. So everyone came back. So I know we don't have them in the additions, but that's what they did all free agency is just sign all their guys back. Even though they were very similar to another team in Tampa, like the Tampa Bay Lightning, where it's like, oh, they won't have the cap space, and then somehow they sign all their guys. And that's exactly what the Bucs did too. They're like, oh, they're not going to be able to sign all their guys, and they were able to get them all back, except Joe Haig, who went to the Steelers. That was their one key subtraction. In terms of key additions, I didn't even see you had everyone else on there, so I appreciate that. I just read that. But in terms of key additions, they also added Joe Tryon in the first round of the draft, and they got Gio Bernard to, I guess, replace LaShawn McCoy, I guess, or unless he's still there too. I don't know. Unless you're trying to maybe bank on, maybe there's going to be Fournette or Rojo is going to get hurt, but I'm pretty sure Keyshawn Vaughn is still there as well. So I don't really understand why they traded him. He could be an early cut. Who knows? But yeah, those are the additions they made. And yeah, this team is really good. I don't really know what else we had to say about this team. But do you have any in-depth expert analysis for this team, Roman?
Well, yeah, my key analysis and the key addition is to have everyone else. That's all you really need to know about the team. It's gonna look exactly the same, probably even a lot better since we kind of mentioned they will have a full training camp together.
Yep.
Brady's used to the division now. I mean, he's the GOAT, so there's really nothing to ask for that in that sense. But they're not gonna go 17-0 like they've been kind of mentioning, being the first team to go undefeated or 17-0 in the season. I think that'll be a little bit far fetched, but I do think they're even going to take a big step forward this year. Even they're going to win the division quite clearly. I think all of us can agree on that. I think they're the Super Bowl favorite for me. I don't want to look too far ahead, but I think I even said it in our Super Bowl recap at the end of last season. They're the Super Bowl favorites for me coming into this year. So nothing really much to ask, nothing much to gripe with. I think this team is going to be better than last year, which is going to be surprising to at least think because they were so dominant at the end of last year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add there. I mean, the training camp. I mean, I know I mentioned with the Panthers. I mean, this is the training camp on another level. I mean, they went 11-5 last year, and they were still getting used to each other. They training camp was basically like the first few weeks of the regular season. So now the fact they have a full training camp, by all accounts, I believe Brady has been having like secret workouts with his teammates and everything, like he did last year. Chris Godwin should hopefully be healthy the whole year. Mike Evans too. He had a monster touchdown season last year, but his stats weren't great.
Yeah.
Except down the stretch, though, he really got hot and really was able to form a really good chemistry with Brady. So you expect them to build off of that from last year. Their defense was really good last year as well, and as we've already mentioned, they've brought all their guys back, and they also added Joe Tryon, who I think is a solid rookie linebacker to that unit. So yeah, I don't know. I think I mentioned last week I had like three like top NFC teams. I think I said the Rams, the Niners, and then the Bucs. And I think you can throw the Packers in that mix as well now because Aaron Rodgers has officially reported to camp that we found a couple days ago. I'd say I think the Packers might even be a little bit lower than those three teams though. But those are like my big NFC teams. But if I had to choose one right now, I think it's got to be the Bucs. I mean, I know it's kind of low hanging fruit because they're defending champs, but when you look at the Rams, as we talked about last week, the Rams and the Niners have some question marks. The Packers have some question marks. The Bucs, I mean, they really don't have that many question marks. And to be honest, we did say the same thing a year ago about the Chiefs, and then the season was kind of tough for them, and they still found a way to make it to the Super Bowl, but then they ended up losing, obviously, to the Bucs. So maybe that'll be the same thing that happens here with Tampa Bay, but at least as it stands right now in late July of 2021, they're a really good team with very few weaknesses, and I think we potentially could see a rematch in this year's Super Bowl because I do think the AFC it's like the Chiefs and then everybody else. Yeah, which might not be fun for people. I know people got really irritated in the NBA when it was Cavs Warriors for like 10 years straight, but we might be able to maybe seeing this again at least for the next 2 years because I think that's Brady's contract extension goes through 2022. But yeah, I know you want to add something.
Yeah, I was really just gonna say this Buccaneers and Chiefs could be like the Cavs Warriors
Yep.
finals rivalry. So that could be very interesting. The Chiefs got a ton better as well. But I will mention though that we didn't. It's not like that big of a deal. But Brady apparently did play in the Super Bowl on a torn MCL. They did get
Yeah.
surgery to repair that. So hopefully he's doing well in his recovery. But he should be good to go. I mean, they haven't reported anything bad about him. But just furthering his legacy as the GOAT playing in the Super Bowl on a torn MCL. So that's pretty cool.
Well, that's just scary too, because I mean, he wasn't like he was an MVP level at Brady last year, but the fact that he was
Well,
playing on a torn MCL, now he's not. I mean, that's scary. And now you give him a full training camp and everything. I mean, I don't think I think the last team to win back-to-back Super Bowls was the Patriots. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
03 and 04. So it'd be kind of cool. Maybe Brady, wins 3 in a row here to finish off his legendary career and then retires. That'd be kind of sweet. But yeah, I know people are probably want us to like really crap on this team and give more expert
No
analysis, but
chance. No chance.
as it stands right now, there's really not too much to dislike about this team. There just really isn't. I'm sure, as any team does, they face adversity throughout the year, but yeah, it should be a really fun team to watch again. A lot of just great personalities, great storylines. Well, I think I don't know if you agree with this, but in my opinion, I'm of course biased because I love Brady, but one of like the funnest like really good teams to watch in a very long time. And maybe I know a lot of people love the Chiefs, but I don't know. I don't love the Chiefs that much, but that's just my thing. But yeah, I do also. I know we'll get into record predictions in a second, but I kind of forgot this game was happening until I looked at their schedule and was breaking down my record predictions. I forgot they go to Foxborough this year and play the
Mm-hmm.
Pats. I completely forgot about that. That's going to be an awesome game. Probably one of the biggest games of the year, I think, for any team would be
Oh
that
yeah.
game. Brady going back to the Foxborough, playing against Belichick, possibly playing against the next Brady and Mac Jones. We'll have to wait and see if Max. I think that game's a little bit early on in the season, so we'll have to
It's
wait
like
and see
week
if maybe,
4 or something, 3 or
yeah, if
4.
Mac is even starting at that point. But yeah, that should be a really fun game to watch, though. Um, but I think I have done the first record predictions for like every team, so I'll let you start off. Where do you have the Bucs finishing up here in 2021?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, they're not going to go 17-0 like they've been kind of mentioning. But I have them at 13-4, winning the division quite easily. Even improving off of last year, like I mentioned. I think they have so much going their way, and I think the division is theirs to lose.
Yeah, I have them going slightly higher at 14-3. So I have them winning one more game, obviously, but we're still think they're going to be really good. Again, easily winning the division. And then you and Chris are on lockstep on this one. Both you guys have them going 13-4. So across the board, we really like this team. They also benefit, I think, a little bit. I mean, if they were in like the NFC West, they'd probably lose a few more games. They do benefit a little bit from like being the clear cut top tier team, and then the 3 teams below them are still kind of figuring some stuff out. But you never know. Maybe one of those teams will pop off. The Panthers, Saints, or maybe even the Falcons. Who knows? And really give the Bucs a run for their money. But and Brady is human, so I mean, maybe he's old now. Maybe he's who knows? I don't know. Maybe they get a bunch of injuries again. I mean, it's football; anything can happen. But and like I said, as it stands right now in late July, this is one of the best teams in the NFL. But so really quick before we jump into our fantasy favorites, let's just quickly go through the standings. So I'll go over mine and Chris's real quick, and then Roman, you can go over yours. So I have the Bucs at number 1 at 14-3. The Panthers second at 8-9. The Saints third at 7-10, and then the Falcons in last at 6-11. Chris, pretty similar, but a little bit different. He's also got the Bucs in first at 13-4. You got the Saints in second at 9-8, the Panthers in third at 7-10, and then you got the Falcons also in last at 6-11.
Yeah, and I have the Bucs at 13-4. I have the Saints second at 10-7, and I have the Falcons and Panthers tied for third and fourth at 6-11.
Yeah, so we're a little bit different. We're all a little bit different, but we're also kind of in the same boat. It seems like you're higher on the Saints, I'm higher on the Panthers, and Chris just is kind of on everybody.
It's like last week though, because I was higher on the Seahawks than you both. I apparently like
Yeah.
I apparently like the established teams a little more than the upcoming ones.
Yes.
But it's interesting just for this division.
Yes. And yeah, and Chris is just kind of like I said, he's just kind of that. He's not. There's no team, at least based on his records, that he's super high on. Outside of the Bucs, obviously. But let's go in now to our fantasy favorite player from this division. Who is your best player here? Or not best player, but the player you like the most.
Yeah, for me, it's tight end for the Saints, Adam Troutman. I think he's going to have a great season this year. Under the radar last year. It was his rookie season, so as we mentioned, tight ends don't have that kind of trend. But this year, especially, Michael Thomas, he'll be out for half the season. They don't have many other weapons outside of Kamara. I think Adam Troutman is going to come in as the clear-cut tight end 1 on that team. I think he's going to have a great season just because of availability and the accessibility of their weapons. I think he can, step up in that role really greatly. And even in fantasy drafts, he goes at the very end of drafts. Most likely not, you can get him undrafted. So I think, his stock has risen a little bit just because of the Thomas injury, but definitely a guy you can snag late. I don't think you can start him. Don't draft him as your tight end one going into the season. I think you'll definitely need a couple games to step into it. But if you can pair him with another tight end, I think you're going to be solid and ready to go.
Yeah, I know you and Chris are really high on him. I also think he's going to have a really successful season. I really didn't, until I really started doing some research for this episode, I really didn't notice how thin the receiving core is for the Saints. I mean, they got like what, Traquan Smith, and that's Alvin Kamara, and that's really it. So someone's got to catch the ball, especially if Jameis Winston's playing, because he's obviously doesn't have the same level of running and mobility that Taysom Hill has. So if Winston starts, I think Troutman is like a really, he could have a top 10 tight end season, I think, in fantasy. And like you said, you can get him basically undrafted. So I really like
Mhm.
that pick. I think that's solid for sure. So Chris's pick is Antonio Brown. This is a guy who Chris just absolutely just fell in love with, it seems like, very recently. I know he took him in our redraft. He took him pretty high in our redraft, to be honest, that we did last week. So he really loves Antonio Brown. He just likes that the kind of like we were talking about with the Bucs. I know he likes with the full training camp. AB and Brady. It seems like they have a personal relationship that tends to kind of show off on the football field as well. You can get AB very late in drafts. So for all those reasons, Chris really likes drafting Antonio Brown for your fantasy team. So for me, since I'm last, I'll go over a few of my honorable mentions. I do really like Tom Brady, to be honest with you. I don't think he's going to be done. Only he's washed. You can get him as like the QB 10 to 15 range usually, maybe a little higher just because he is Tom Brady, and he has that boost because of his name value. But you can get him pretty late, and you can maybe even get him as your backup in some circumstance. I know Chris did that in our redraft last week. But yeah, he can be, and I think he has the potential to have a top 5 quarterback season for sure. I also like Godwin and Evans. They, because of their not maybe off seasons last year, but they weren't as like the top 10 guys they usually are. They're dropping to like the 4th to 6th round. And I think they can have the potential to have wide receiver one seasons. I know for me, I went receiver, quarterback, tight end heavy in my fantasy draft. I got Mike Evans as my wide receiver one in like the 5th or 6th or 7th round, and I was really happy about that. So I think they're based on their draft price. That's awesome. And then also Calvin Ridley too. I mean, you can get him in like the 3rd or 4th round. And I think he, as we talked about too, there's touches galore there in Atlanta. So I think he could have a really big season as well. And I know like Justin Jefferson's going ahead of him, AJ Brown's going ahead of him. No disrespect to those guys, but I think Calvin Ridley could have very easily have a better season than both those guys, I think. But I know I had a lot of honorable mentions there, but I wanted to get him off my chest. My main guy, I kind of teased at it earlier. It's Robbie Anderson. He's like going super, super late. I mean, I got him as, and I almost got him. I know I got him in our dynasty league, I think. Like way, way late, like 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th round. And he's like, I mean, he's got a previously established relationship with Sam Darnold. They, by all accounts, the connection, the chemistry is still there at training camp so far. And like you said, you can get this. Like I said, you can get this guy as like your wide receiver 3, 4, 5, and he could easily be your wide receiver 2 by the end of the season. So when you're looking at for those depth receivers after you miss out on maybe the top guys, this is a guy you can easily snag up there and really provide some much needed depth for your fantasy lineup. And you can start him either in bye weeks. You can start him just to start him as a flex option. I mean, I think he's going to have a really nice season. And I'm surprised that, and maybe we'll see this later on as we get closer to the start of the season. I'm surprised with all the positive juice and momentum that's coming out of training camp that his ADP hasn't risen dramatically. I mean, it's still very low. And I know we're both high on Corey Davis. We're not high on Corey Davis. We kind of like Corey Davis. He's like, they're going around the same area. No disrespect to Corey Davis, but like, I'm taking Robbie Anderson any day of the week over Corey Davis. So I really, really love Robbie. He's one of my favorite players in fantasy this year for sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry I spoiled that pick a little bit earlier on,
No, you're
but
good.
yeah, all those guys you mentioned are really solid picks, especially the Bucs guys. I don't want to talk about them too much, but I don't think either of them will have as many volatile games as they saw last year. Evans was always on and off, maybe 2 touchdowns and like 5 yards or whatever. I think both of those guys will be much more consistent, and then for Robbie Anderson, obviously, just having the connection with Sam Darnold, that'll be very key for them. And Robbie Anderson's ADP is much lower than the other guys that you mentioned. So definitely a guy you can target later in the middle rounds. But yeah, you can't go wrong with either of those guys. And one other honorable mention is Mike Davis. Just I like him a
Yeah.
lot, especially from the running back perspective. Clear cut starter day one. You can get him in the middle rounds. Once after like the not tier one RBs, but like all those expected guys as starters, maybe in the running backs and after the fifth round, you're gonna see Mike Davis there. You might see Javonte Williams, Miles Gaskin, but I think Mike Davis is gonna be a good option if you don't want to take the chance of, or if you don't take running back early, you can definitely go Mike Davis in the middle rounds as well.
Yeah, I love Mike Davis too. I'm glad you mentioned him because even Dynasty, it's a little bit different, but for redraft, you can like he often goes after guys like ETN, Javante,
Mm-hmm.
Raheem Mostert, in some cases Michael Carter, Miles Gaskin, as you mentioned. He goes super late, and all those guys. I mean, it's looking like it's going to be running back by committee. A lot of concerns there, a lot of question marks in a lot of those different situations, and the fact that you could like pass on all those guys, have everybody else take those guys, and then you can get Mike Davis later in your draft. I mean, that's awesome value, especially as we already mentioned too with Arthur Smith, his offense. He obviously with Derrick Henry loves running the ball, and we've seen Mike Davis's football size thighs. So I think they're going to run the ball a lot, and Mike Davis, as you mentioned, is the bona fide RB1 in that lineup. So you can draft him as your RB3, RB4, and he gives you some really nice depth, similar to Robbie Anderson. Gives you some really nice depth for that position in your fantasy rosters.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So do you have anything else you want to touch on for this division before we wrap it up?
No, like I said at the top, this division was obviously the most intriguing last year, but this year kind of a little bit more expected. Besides, the Panthers, the Falcons, you don't really know what you might get with them, not even the Saints. But yeah, this isn't not as much controversy on this one. The Bucs, clear cut favorites. Nothing much to argue with that one.
Yeah, I agree. It's Bucs and then kind of everybody else. No
Hmm.
team is brutal in this division, but there's no like Super Bowl contender outside of the Bucs, unless Sam Darnold becomes an MVP candidate, which could very well happen, but who knows? All right, so once again, we are the Zone Defense Podcast. The NFL season is heating up. We're in August, basically in August now. So we're gonna have lots more of these divisional previews. We'll probably have a overall playoff and Super Bowl and tier list breakdown probably as we get closer to the NFL season. We'll probably try and do some other fantasy mock drafts and fantasy episodes as well as we get closer to the year. So make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Twitter at Zone Defense Podcast, and search us on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss any of that awesome content. Chris and I will also be trying to continue our Zone Defense basketball hours. With the NBA draft just wrapping up, we'll hopefully do an episode pretty quickly too with breaking down the draft and the picks, and free agency is right around the corner. So we'll do a lot of great NFL content, a lot of great NBA content. So be sure to subscribe to us, as I mentioned, so you don't miss any of that awesome stuff. Also, smash that like button and drop a comment down below. Let us know your takes on our standings predictions. As Rowan mentioned, this isn't a very controversial division like we did last week. But who knows? Maybe you're much higher on the Saints than I was, or higher on the Falcons than both of us were, or maybe you think the Panthers are going to absolutely suck and Sam Darnold is awful at quarterback, which is unlike what I think. But whatever your takes are, whatever your stances are, please let us know in the comments. We love trying to read those and responding to them as quickly as we can. But once again, thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.